In this video, Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride dismantles Rachel Reeves' emergency budget. Before we get into this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Let's listen to what Mel Stride has to say.
This emergency budget, Mr. Speaker, has brought the Right Honourable Lady to a cold, hard reckoning. She has become very fond recently to talk about the world having changed. Well, indeed it has, Mr. Speaker. This country was growing at the fastest rate in the G7 only about a year ago. And just as the OECD and the Bank of England and other forecasters, and now we learn today, the OBR have stated, growth has been halved in this year, cut in two as a consequence of the decisions and the choices that the Right Honourable Lady made on her watch. Inflation, which was down to 2%, bang on target on the very day of the last general election under a Conservative government. We are now told this year will be running at twice the level as was forecast under ourselves in 2024. This is going to mean prices bearing down on households and on businesses right across the country because of her choices. And the OBR also says, Mr. Speaker, that unemployment will be rising this year and next year and the year after. And in fact, across the forecast period, it will not decline at all. So much for the Right Honourable Lady's back-to-work plans. And we have already seen, Mr. Speaker, what it means when it comes to controlling borrowing under this Chancellor. And yes, she has come forward now with a plan to squeeze spending later on in the forecast period. And she has, of course, told the OBR that these are the elements of spending restraint to which she will stick. But what do the markets think? And can I ask the Right Honourable Lady, given her track record, given the fact that she has failed to control spending and borrowing to date, what does she think the markets are going to make of her latest promises? But the Right Honourable Lady, Mr. Speaker, says, of course, that none of this is her fault. It is the war in Ukraine. It is President Trump. It is tariffs. It is President Putin. It is the Conservatives. It is her legacy. It is anybody but her. Well, what the British people know, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a consequence of her choices. She is the architect of her own misfortune. It was the Right Honourable Lady, Mr. Speaker, who talked down the economy. Who talked down the economy so that business surveys and confidence crashed through the floor. It was the Right Honourable Lady who confected the £22 billion black hole. A smokescreen that was only ever there in order to cover up for the fact that she and the Prime Minister reneged on their promises to the British during the last general election. And a black hole that the OBR themselves, ironically at the government's behest, have said they will not legitimise. She chose to be reckless with a sliver of headroom against her fiddled targets. She borrowed and spent and taxed like it was the 1970s. Little wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor has tanked the economy. Little wonder we have an emergency budget, all because of her choices. Now, the Chancellor likes to tour the television studios and tell everybody they should be thankful that she will not be ramping up taxes in this emergency budget as she did before. But that will be cold comfort to the millions up and down the country waiting in fear and trepidation for the start of the new tax year. Buckling under the burden of tax that will be rising to the highest tax burden on her watch in the history of our country. And so could I ask the Right Honourable Lady if when she replies in a moment, she will give that much needed reassurance, particularly to businesses, that she will not be ramping up taxes still further in the autumn. Even a basic economist, Mr. Speaker, knows that if you tax something, you get less of it. You don't need to have worked at the Bank of England for 10 years, Mr. Speaker, to know that. So what did the Chancellor tax? She taxed jobs and wealth creation. She's destroyed livelihoods, businesses, clobbered, big and small companies, the backbone of our economy. Enterprise crushed on the altar of her ineptitude. The CIPD telling us a third of those businesses affected will shed labour. Morrison's losing 200 jobs, Tesco 400. Sainsbury's, 3,000 jobs lost. No wonder the Federation of Small Business say that outside of the pandemic, business confidence has been left at its lowest level on record. But it's not just businesses, Mr. Speaker. It's charities, it's GPs, it's pharmacists, it's those who transport children who have special educational needs, and it is hospices caring for the sick and the dying. In this House, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party had the opportunity yesterday and last week to stop that. But they voted our amendments down. And we will never let their constituents forget it. Mr. Speaker, if you ramp up taxes, if you ramp up borrowing and spending without any commensurate improvement in productivity, it leads to growing inflation. And inflation has been increasing on this government's watch. It means that interest rates stay higher for longer. The Chancellor just now trumpeted the fact that there had been 3 interest rate cuts since the Labour Party came to office. She knows full well there should have been more than that had she managed. She knows full well, Mr. Speaker. She knows full well that interest rates are higher for longer because of the choices that she took. And this has led, Mr. Speaker, to servicing costs for our national debt, which is running at twice the defence budget. And today we have learned from the OBR that debt interest is to increase still further. None of this money, Mr. Speaker, is going to be spent on public services. It will be going down the drain. Mr. Speaker, the real black hole, Mr. Speaker, the real black hole is not the one the Chancellor invented, it is the one the Chancellor created. It's not a central problem, Mr. Speaker, the fact that this Chancellor is a gambler. Even with her fiddled fiscal targets, she left way too little headroom. And it's not the truth that whilst the Right Honourable Lady said at the last budget that that was a once-in-a-Parliament reset, she rolled the dice on a wafer-thin margin, and she lost. Reckless with her fingers crossed, she fiddled the targets and she missed them.
I'm not sure about the language we use. I think there are better words and more constructive words the Shadow Chancellor would prefer to use.
Can I just point out, thank you, Mr. Can I just point out that all of her fiscal headroom disappeared, not just some of it. In fact, she went underwater to the tune of £4.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, reeling from one fiscal event to the next is not a way to run the public finances.
When leaders choose to blame everyone and everything else for the mistakes they make, it forces them to continue on a path of no return, making things worse for themselves and everyone else. One of the many responsibilities of a leader is to take responsibility for their actions. When leaders take responsibility for decisions they make, it opens their minds to see alternative opportunities that could make things much better. If you have benefited in any way from this video, please subscribe, like, share, and be sure to leave us a comment.